John Meacham has a wonderful quote: history is not a GPS, but a diagnostic guide. Mm-hmm. And that's what I view the equity report as. It is a diagnostic guide to let the reader know this was the issue, this is the problem, this is the work that they've been doing. And the reader can have a choice to say, I like the direction that they're going. I want to support them. Let me support them in their work. You're not going to be able to keep in life. You're not going to be able to keep every donor, every person, and that's okay. But how I lead is what is in the best interest of the organization. You can't be scared. Yes, you have some fear, but you just have to do it.
The big question: how quickly can brands and businesses change and modernize in response to the changing demographics globally? The future of work, demand for modernizing the practice of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and industry corrections. This is why we started the Change Podcast by Reframe, to help people leaders like you get answers that accelerate inclusive change and growth that reflects where the world is going. Get ready as we host a discussion with people leaders faced with the same challenges and modernize their approach to solving a decades-old problem. I'm your host, Jeffrey L. Bowman. Krista, thank you for making the time to come and talk with us a little bit. And, as we said before, I'm Jeffrey Bowman, co-founder and CEO of Reframe, your host for today. And I really want to take about 30 to 45 minutes, very conversational in terms of, we're doing this podcast as a pilot to interview people leaders that are accelerating change in their industry, in their company, and really all about building inclusive experiences within their industry as well. To kick things off, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, and, the position that you hold, and how long you've been at your present company?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me and for the opportunity. My name is Krista Terrell. I am president of the Arts and Science Council. We are the local arts agency here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, North Carolina. I've been with ASC for 20 years.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great.
Have moved within the organization, mainly in PR and marketing communications functions, and have served as president for about 1 year and 6 months so far. So really,
congratulations.
Thank you. Really enjoying the role. And I'm originally born and raised in Augusta, Georgia.
Oh, wow. So you're Southerner.
Yes.
Uh-huh. So what inspired you to build a career in arts and culture? Where was that inspiration from?
Well, I think the inspiration really came from my mother. I really would not be where I am today if it were not for my mother, who exposed me to arts and cultural experiences as a young child in Augusta. Remember going to Augusta Mini Theater, which was a space created for Black youth to have experiences and to learn about theater, dance, etc. And for me, I really leaned into the dance part of it. I appreciate theater, but dance was really, that really spoke to me.
Was it your first love?
It is my first love. It is my first love. So much so that my thoughts of my career was supposed to be on stage. My dream was to be a dancer with Ailey Company.
Oh, wow. Not too late.
I think it is. I can take classes there as an adult and enjoy that experience. But I went to a performing arts school in Augusta from 6th to 12th grade, Davidson Fine Arts, and majored in ballet. That was my track. So I enjoyed having it every morning before academic classes, and then after school, I would go to Augusta Ballet and train. My dream was to go to Howard University and take master classes from Debbie Allen and all of that, but ended up applied to Howard and got accepted, but ended up going to Johnson C. Smith University here in Charlotte, which in the end, it turned out great.
Right. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so when you were thinking about, you wanted to be a performer within arts and culture, or within arts specifically. And, if within our audience is someone thinking about as a performer, but oftentimes they're not introduced to things that happen behind the scenes, like off the stage. Directionally, when you got to Johnson C. Smith, was that something that you majored in? Is it something that you pursued in terms of how do you blend arts and business? How do you blend arts and nonprofit? Like, was that in your mind when you were going to?
So when I started going to Johnson C. Smith, they did not have an arts track or a dance track, but I continued to fuel my passion by, I choreographed Miss Johnson C. Smith's coronation. I did the AKAs. They had a Mr. AKA pageant. I, choreographed that. But then when I was at Smith, that's when I started learning about things behind the scenes, because that was when I was introduced to public relations.
Oh.
And took classes and really fell in love with it. And my goal was, I want to have a job waiting in the wings, and I really need to have an internship every single year. Okay. And so one of my internships was actually with Spirit Square, Center for Arts and Education.
Okay. And
here in Charlotte.
Spirit Square for folks that are not in Charlotte?
Well, it's no longer, back in the day, in the 90s, it was its own nonprofit providing cultural experiences, a variety of experiences, and really on arts education. And so when I interned there in the PR and marketing department, that was when I really learned about, this is kind of behind the scenes of awareness and marketing and PR for acts. For example, like I remember doing a poster for Celia Cruz and having those experiences. She's passed away, but she is a famous Latino singer, I believe from Cuba. That's when I learned about that experience and really enjoyed learning about things behind the scenes. So I think in the end, I feel like my life has come full circle, because while I'm not on stage performing, I am behind the scenes fueling and advocating to make things happen for arts and culture.
And so when you graduated, did you go pursue public relations? Or how does one fall into a career in arts?
So when I graduated from Smith, I did not fall into a career in the arts. I actually had an internship at Burson Marsteller in Washington, D.C. And also during my internships, that's when I really learned I enjoyed the nonprofit space and not the agency world so much around billable hours. For me,
so
it's
that was an agency you went to?
Burson Marsteller is, yes. Or it was an internship. So it's important for me to have passion about what I do. And I think having different clients, am I passionate about tires? Well, not really.
Right.
So, for me, it's really important for me to have a passion about the work that I'm doing, or the industry or sector of where I am working. And so when that ended, I came back to Charlotte. Actually, my first job was PR specialist at Johnson C. Smith University, my alma mater.
So you came back.
Came back. So that was really interesting, being there as an employee versus a student, again, learning more things behind the scenes. And then actually a woman named Sherry Waters, who worked at Johnson C. Smith, she was connected to an organization called Community School of the Arts. They're now called Arts Plus, and said, hey, they're looking for a marketing communications director. I think you'd be great for this role. And so went and applied, and that's how I landed into the cultural sector as a full-time employee.
Did she know your interest in terms of arts?
She knew my interest in terms of arts, yes.
Beautiful.
Yes. And we had that relationship, because she loved art, loves arts as well.
For some people that pursuing careers, oftentimes I'm even presented with questions like, I'm looking for a mentor, I'm looking for a sponsor. How did you cultivate that relationship to where she could tap into something that was your passion? Is it something you had weekly meetings? Is it something where...
No, we did have weekly meetings. In her role, she was director of student activities.
Right.
And so we built a relationship there when I was a student at Smith.
Okay.
But then working there, she really wasn't a mentor. We just built a relationship, got to know one another, and learned about each other's interests. It was very organic, yes.
Perfect.
But I do recommend for people that are looking for mentors,
or sponsors,
or sponsors, be very clear about what it is that you're seeking, how they can be of help and guidance to you, and more importantly, just show up.
Right.
Commit to what it is that you're doing, because they're taking their time to do. Absolutely.
Love it. And so what time frame was this? Was this in the 90s, the 2000s?
So I graduated in 97 from Johnson C. Smith and started working in the fall of 97 to 2000 to 19, I think like 1999. And then that's when I went to community school, now Arts Plus. And so learned a lot about that. And then during my time there, a woman named Kim McMillan, who is my mentor, one of my mentors, was over PR and marketing for the Arts and Science Council. And so since Community School of the Arts was one of the organizations that the Arts and Science Council supports, I was involved in kind of her marketing team if there's something sector-wide, and we built a relationship there. And then when a position opened, she said, would love for you to apply. I applied, had to do the writing test and all of that. And so in 2002 is when I joined the Arts and Science Council.
Gotcha. Wow. I mean, you think about the beginning of 2000s, and you're making a transition, pursuing something within the culture sector in the city of Charlotte. For those who are not familiar with ASC or the culture sector within Charlotte, can you just give like a high overview in terms of what it is?
Sure.
When did it start, and the mission of ASC?
So the Arts and Science Council was created in 1958, really primarily as a United Arts Fund, kind of a clearinghouse and also a fundraiser for arts and culture. And it really focused on funding. In 1958, there were 8 key organizations, from the symphony, children's theater, etc. And over the years, it has grown into a local arts agency, really in the 70s. And the core of the local arts agency is really to ensure that arts is accessible for everyone. The role of the local arts agency is to ensure that their focus is on the broader cultural sector, not just certain geographic spaces.
Everywhere? It's nationally?
It is national, yes. There are, I think, about 4,300 local arts agencies across the nation.
And how do those things start? Because a lot of people have never even heard of a local arts agency, right?
Yes. Well, they start, I think, because people in the community want someone or an organization that is leading this effort to ensure that arts and culture is accessible to everyone. Actually, the first local arts agency was started up the road in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, and a colleague of mine, Chase Law, is now leading that. Okay. I have another former colleague of ASC, Liz Fitzgerald, is now recently became president of the Cabarrus Arts Council. So they range in various sizes and scopes. Their scopes are very different. Liz, when I think about Liz and Cabarrus, she actually manages a building that has gallery space and classrooms and things like that, and a theater. ASC, our role, we don't do that as a local arts agency.
So every local arts agency has a same mission, but a different outcome.
And different scopes of work as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. And so you can imagine, like, an organization started 1950s. What was the state of like arts and culture when you think back to the early 2000s for Charlotte? What was it like then?
Well, it was really in early 2000s when I came to ASC, the primary focus was really around the operating support and the long-standing organizations. This cultural sector was doing very well financially due to the funding model that was put in place, which is really through workplace campaigns. So
like employee giving. So
if you work at Bank of America, you can show up, have a campaign, you can do payroll deductions or so that model led us to become one of the top United Arts funds in the country. It'd always be a battle between Cincinnati and Charlotte.
So corporations would fund these giving campaigns.
Well, not necessarily. The corporations would give us access to their employees to be able to go in and demonstrate this is the value, this is the role of arts and culture, and they could choose to give to us. So historically in Charlotte, it was United Way in the fall and ASC in the winter, and those were the two primary workplace campaigns. Corporations would also give dollars to ASC as well as the public sector. We are the designated agency for the State Arts Council, North Carolina Arts Council, as well as we get funding from the city as well as the county, and over several years, the town started contributing as well. But there is a challenge with the workplace giving model because, number one, it was very transactional. You're not building relationships with donors. For example, if you worked at Wells Fargo or Wachovia at the time, we may only get your email address in that Jeffrey Bowman gave $1,000 and I have your work email address. But if you leave and go to Bank of America, I've lost you. And really never had an opportunity to learn what is your passion as it relates to arts and culture. Is it theater? Is it music? So, when I came to ASC, we were really riding that wave. Again, one of the top United Arts funds in the country. But then the 2008 recession happened and we went from $11 million to $7 million and it continued to decline. But the focus of those dollars that were raised in the past was really for operating support grants. Those are unrestricted dollars that were given to, back in the day, believe it was about 20 organizations, ranging from the Symphony and the Mint Museum.
And when you say
in Charlotte,
unrestricted dollars, what does that mean to most?
Unrestricted operating. So it is core dollars to keep the lights on, to do the programming, to pay the staff for that organization to be able to do its work. Unrestricted dollars are the hardest dollars to raise for an organization.
So you could say most of the giving, philanthropy, any of the arts organizations typically get restricted dollars. And what does that mean for folks that are not familiar with that term?
Well, there's a mix of unrestricted dollars and restricted dollars. So, for example, if we get money from Mecklenburg County, that is all restricted. So it has to go to specific programs, meaning arts education or our culture blocks program. But unrestricted dollars really, those restricted dollars are important. Those unrestricted dollars, again, are the hardest dollars to raise and what is really needed to help an organization operate, meaning from grant software systems to, again, paying staff, everything.
So the crises happened, 2008. I'm going to flash forward a little bit because I know a little bit more about you. You, growing up, had a passion for arts. At any moment as you made your pivot from Johnson C. Smith into the sector, did you ever grow up thinking you would become president? Absolutely
not. That was never in my path or my ambition. It was really to be the senior public relations practitioner, and that's what I am and was able to be due to ASC and my growth there. But I had never imagined that I would become president. But I knew at a point in my career, I did want a growth opportunity. And when my predecessor stepped down kind of unexpectedly, the board asked me to serve for 30 to 35 days as acting president. And I did that. And then afterwards, they said, "You're doing such a great job. We want you to lead the organization." And so I said, I am up for this challenge. It has its challenging moments, and I am in the middle, of a challenge, but I enjoy the work. I have an amazing team who gets up every day and is committed to our mission. And ASC's mission is really to invest in people, programs, and ideas that move us toward a more equitable, creative ecosystem, and that is sustainable.
And when you say equitable, what does that mean to you?
So equity is really about being fair and doing that in all aspects of the organization, especially in all aspects of our grant making, meaning where are we showing up, eliminating barriers to access those funds, making sure that we are helping people through the process of applying for grants or getting connected to workshops. One thing that's really important to me is who's sitting at the table and who's not sitting at the table as it relates to the funding decisions. And then also being accountable, transparent and accountable to the work, who we are funding and who we're not funding. That when we say equitable distribution of resources, that is what's really important to me. And also in telling the truth about history of inequities.
So you describe when you started in terms of where the arts and culture sector was with Charlotte. Given where you are today in the seat that you sit in, what's the state of arts and culture within Charlotte? Within the sector specifically. And you can speak more broadly and then to Charlotte, but where are we at?
So we've made great progress as it relates to arts and culture in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. And ASC has really started its evolution in 2015 because we're here to serve the residents of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, and they have articulated to us of how they want the cultural sector to serve them. Build community, build bridges across difference. They want relevant, diverse, and innovative programming for a changing population. And they also want art, science, and history to be central to pre-K through 12 education. So
who says that?
Residents across Charlotte-Mecklenburg.
And when you think about 2000s versus where we are today, has the resident population changed?
The resident population has changed dramatically. Actually, in the 2010 census, that's when Mecklenburg County became a majority minority city. And again, ASC was still kind of behind the curve during that time, but started that shift in 2014, 2015. So I would say the state of arts and culture now, we definitely, number one, is still continues to be, the biggest issue is the funding issue. We also have issues around space. Artists and organizations need space to work, space to, house their sets and costumes and things like that. But the revenue piece is really, really critical for the sustainability and also the growth of Charlotte-Mecklenburg. But I'm really proud of the work that ASC has done since 2015, number one, to become a more equitable organization, and that we have really leaned into supporting creative individuals as well as grassroots organizations. Our focus is not on those long-standing organizations. We still support them and think they're important. We support them in different ways, but it is our role and our responsibility to serve the residents of Charlotte-Mecklenburg, no matter where they live. I always say, everyone understands you need to come uptown for the mountaintop experiences like Hamilton on Broadway or The Color Purple on Broadway. But residents also want experiences close to where they live. They want their child to attend a dance class at a rec center. They want to be able to throw a pot on a wheel close to where they live. And so that's what we're working to ensure they have access to those experiences.
Sounds like you guys are taking a leadership role in terms of, the arts and culture sector. Would you say that's reflective for all of arts and culture from a sector standpoint? Wanted to make that pivot, wanted to make that shift?
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to make that shift to be really out of the learnings of the 2014 Cultural Vision Plan, where the residents articulated those three things to us.
Okay.
But
is everyone else following in line?
Oh, some, not much.
No, not much.
Yes, we are a leader in that, and we do our best to influence organizations of all sizes to do that work, especially the longstanding organizations. But it has to be more than just for organizations or even creatives to just talk. You have to show up and do the work. So Culture Blocks is a great example that's funded by Mecklenburg County.
And
Where
what is Culture Blocks?
So Culture Blocks is a program that is funding opportunity that is funded by Mecklenburg County, where we ASC we're in 10 communities constantly listening to and learning from residents about the arts and cultural experiences that they want to see. They have a cultural life already. We want to connect them to the assets that are here in the community. Again, creative individuals, organizations of all sizes. And so in those blocks, which are very different, we are connecting the residents to organizations and creatives that are going to the communities and doing the work. And it's really also an opportunity for those organizations and creatives to build a relationship with residents in the community. And the nice part about Culture Blocks as well is that it's a partnership with the library system as well as parks and recreation. So you have experiences taking place in those areas, but as well as in some non-traditional spaces as well.
And so given where, it sounds like early on, you guys were highly focused in terms of employee given, has ASC always been a residents first organization in terms of listing and then,
No, it historically, I believe it has not been a resident first. It's really been kind of corporate economic development first. Actually, we've done a series of cultural plans, but what the corporate sector and the public sector in this community said, back in the day, what's going to be the calling card for economic development in Charlotte? We don't have a river running through our town. Right. We don't have mountains. We don't have beaches. We don't have national, a sports team at the time. There was no Panthers, no Hornets, no Checkers. So what's going to be that economic calling card? And they said, well, it's going to be arts and culture. So when you look on Tryon Street, there's South Tryon Street and North Tryon Street, and they decided to first focus on North Tryon Street. It was rundown, drugs, prostitution, etc. But the cultural organizations you see today have really transformed that piece. And they also wanted arts and culture to be the calling card for businesses to move here. What's going to help us attract businesses to move here? So that's when, you now see a discovery place of science, which is the Science Museum. You see McCall Center for Art and Innovation and things like that. So,
and what you reference is I think the term you use to reference those organizations, the cultural
organization, the cultural organizations, and a lot of them are kind of, you consider the long-standing organizations like Discovery Place, and that was really the focus around economic development, but also ensuring that the money is being raised so that those organizations can operate and do what they need to do, and again was used as a calling card for businesses and companies to come here. We still understand that economic development does play a very important role in the community, and that arts and culture plays a role with that. We do the Arts and Economic Prosperity Study with Americans for the Arts. We're in the middle of that right now. That basically is a research that tells you the economic impact of nonprofit arts and cultural organizations and their audiences.
Yeah.
In our role as a local arts agency, we are here to serve the residents of Charlotte Mecklenburg first. And if that is strong, then it will attract tourism.
Gotcha.
And so
top down versus bottoms up, would you say?
Historically, it has been a tops down structure. We have been shifting to be bottoms up. Again, Culture Blocks is a great example of that, and the shifts we've made since the Cultural Vision Plan. There are still structures and people with power in the community that want to keep it as a top down structure, and I don't agree with that. It needs to be about the community.
Exactly. This is where we're about halfway through, and we like to remind everyone, our listeners and audiences, that we purposely named this podcast
The Change Podcast by Reframe.
And part of that is that we know from the work that we've been doing now for nearly 10 years is that, there are a lot of people leaders out there that are making change happen, not just talking about it. And so what you're describing is a tension point, that inflection in terms of ASC has been around, since the 1950s. How is it going to be around past the 2050s, right? And so you are now in leadership as a person of color, a Black woman, driving the ship and driving the sector. When you hear the word people leader, what does that mean to you?
First, it means care to me. Everything starts to me with your team. Mm-hmm. It's really important to nurture them, to care for them, to empower them so that they can do the work of the organization. Make sure that they have those growth opportunities. So when I think about a people leader, I first think about it from the inside, and then it can go out on the outside. But that's where it's core for me. And I believe in taking on this role, I have had to do great care for the organization, for the employees and for the team members, because we have been through a lot these past 2 fiscal years.
No, and on top of that, COVID, George Floyd, just a plethora of things.
Right.
In addition to the sector in itself, one of the other things that we like to ask is, when you think of reframing your work and life, what are some of the things that you're doing at the intersection of your work and life that you're reframing?
I think for me, it's really to get out of and really get the organization out of this grind culture mindset. Mm-hmm. When I came into this role, I had to lay off 40% of my staff.
Oh, wow. That wasn't easy, I bet.
No, that was the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my career, because there's an employee or team member that actually started 2 months after I did. And I had to, lay her off. So that was the hardest day in my professional career. So when I talk about care, that is great care that is needed for the staff. But, back in the day, ASC was a very yes organization with past leaders. Yes, we'll do this. Yes, we'll do that. Well, you had a bigger staff and it was just a go, go, go. I'll never forget in 2008 when we had to down in the fund drive and had to lay off staff and take furloughs. The president at the time said, well, your task for the next 90 days is to figure out how to do more with less. And I was like, in my mind, I was like, no, let's put everything on the shelf and do 2 to 3 things that we really need to focus on. And then when we have the resources to bring it back. So really have been doing intentional work with the team to get out of the grind culture. We know where we're going, what we need to do. But if you were on PTO, then be on PTO. Inform your team members that you're off, and it's just going to have to wait. It's just going to have to wait. So that's one thing that I'm doing for the team, as well as for myself, because I am a workaholic. So trying to be mindful of that, because I do have a family. I have 2 young sons.
So you're intentional. What changes are you making in the process?
Absolutely. I'm trying to do that, and also providing space for my team members, to creating a culture where they know they can come to me. And I've already had built this relationship before I became president, but they know that they can come to me if they're bothered about something or need that outlet to be able to talk. So that's what's really important to me. And also continuing to reframe and shift the narrative as it relates to ASC and our work. Because yes, there's tension, but with the recent events, I'm sure we'll get to that. There are segments of the community that just still see us as the old ASC.
Right.
you should be doing this, only funding operating support, nothing else, when we're like, no.
Things have changed.
Things have changed, and the community is changing, and this is what we need to do to serve, or to, not to serve, but to support.
Thank you for that. So let's go back just a little bit. It's day one. You just got handed the keys to the big office and the big chair. You're now president. What was that like in the first action that you took, given the macro events that were happening at the time?
So it was a lot. Thinking about the first action.
But what was a lot when you say that for the audience members who...
So
give them a little insight in terms of like the day before, the week before, and then what led to that first day.
So what I walked into was an effort by the city of Charlotte that was funding being taken away from ASC by a government entity without coming and talking to us first about it, to say, hey, if they, we don't like this, or et cetera. That just happened. And trying to understand, well, why, what is going on? What does this mean? That is what I walked into. And then again, continued decline of revenue from the fund drive. So having to really get caught up, because it's very interesting being there as a team member for all those years. But then when you're in the president role, it just opens up everything. You're dealing with everything from accounting to
right.
just everything. Right. So trying to understand that and why that was happening. And also, again, it goes back to care. My number one focus was caring for the team, because my predecessor, it kind of took us all off guard and kind of surprised us when my predecessor resigned.
And when you think about, that first day or the first week, none of this happened, after you started, in terms of, so from an evolution standpoint, what would you say were the reasons as to how those things got the way that they became? Which
reasons?
The evolution of ASC, getting to the point to where the funding was...
Well, the evolution of ASC began because of what the residents articulated to us of how they want the cultural sector to serve them. They said, you've done a great job building these cultural organizations, building the facilities. You've done great work there kind of uptown, but now it's time to go to the neighborhood level.
But everyone just didn't walk in and say, okay, Krista, we love everything that's coming out of these reports as it relates to the residents. Was there any pushback in terms of making that transition from an evolution standpoint?
No, there was no pushback. And actually, we started receiving increased funding from Mecklenburg County. We continued to advocate for increased funding from the city of Charlotte, but they continued to remain flat for decades. And there was one bump, but I think it was like a $250,000 bump. But it's always been at about a $3.1 million mark. When again, population is growing, demand for arts and cultural experiences are growing, and it does need to be funded. And when you have this workplace giving model that is broken, it still generates some revenue, but it's no longer the growth engine that it once was. And it's important for the public sector to step up as well as corporations to step up. You're dealing with all of these different revenue streams. And from the corporate sector, they also started shifting to be more around branding, sponsorship opportunities, which really does not support, again, the unrestricted dollars that are needed. But yes, Mecklenburg County started to increase their funding because our work really aligned with what they cared about, which is bringing Mecklenburg County to you.
Sounds like you guys had this report. You heard the residents talk. You still had a tough time, sounds like, making that pivot from the first day you started to where you are today, Can you talk a little bit about, from that first day and you had all these challenges that you had to face? Like, what were some of the things that you did to help shift or make the shift?
Well, I just really kind of had the opportunity to double down on the work and on the journey that we're doing to become a more equitable organization. Really empowering my staff to look even more at who are we not funding and where we need to go and engage with and build a relationship with creatives or organizations.
But why did this not happen before?
Well, it didn't happen just when I started. Again, we started on this journey in 2015, but I think because of the shift in funding, and we were still doing operating support grants at that time, it just allowed me to take a step back and look at where are things, where are we right now, and what do we need to continue to lean on, and not kind of move from the path and the journey that we are on. So one example is,
I was going to ask you about that. What stood out the most when you were trying to decide where to start? Because I've read, it's all in public, that you publish a report that talked about...
you're talking about the equity report.
Yeah.
When in 2019, our board of directors adopted a cultural equity statement. And they said, we are committed to this work and we are going to report annually on our work.
But what drove them to do that report? I'm sure.
What drove them to do that report is just our knowing that we started this journey in 2014, hearing from leaders like Eddie Torres at Grantmakers in the Arts, who came to Charlotte and did a wonderful presentation about the history of inequities, especially around arts and culture. And I mean, yes, there were the whole board wasn't like, yes. I mean, there were some tension points, but in the end, they did approve the statement and said we are committed to doing this, and we're going to report annually on the work. A cultural equity work group was formed internally, and we said, okay, the first report, equity report, I was tapped to be the leader of that. And for me, as well as my team members, we all said, we are not going to talk about the good stuff that we're doing.
And we being ASC?
We meaning ASC.
Okay.
It is important to tell our history and to tell the truth about the organization's history of inequities. And so there's a lot of research that was done to build that report. It was hard for me at times just looking at the data and doing that. But Charlotte is a city that loves shiny and new. They like to talk about the good things, in my opinion, and not too much about the bad things. And so, but we were committed that as the organization, ASC reports on this, we are not going to talk about the shiny and new. And so, in that report, it was published in February of 2021. We apologized in the introduction, for our history of being an inequitable organization. The report also lays out the work we have been doing since 2015 to become a more equitable organization, as well as before 2015, kind of we would start and then stop and start and stop, through the work. But unfortunately, a lot of people just focused so much on the apology and not the work that we have been doing since 2015. And so...
And how was that received? Like, can you talk about this apology? Can you be a little bit more?
So how it was received, I mean, I'll never forget, the first email I received was from a woman that works at UNC Charlotte and said, never in my life have I seen a legacy organization like ASC tell its truth and apologize for that. I'm rooting for you, Krista, and the team. Yeah. Again, I wasn't I was acting president at the time, actually, when the report was published.
Did you lead the report? I mean, someone led the report.
Well, yes, I led the report. I was the editor of the report. And so I'll never forget, that was the first email that I received. But however, I got a lot of positive feedback from creatives, from people in the community. But also started hearing rumblings like, why are they telling who got the largest, funding over the years? Because there's a page in there where you'll see that from, 1990s to I think it was 2020 or, the Mint has received the largest, the Symphony has received, these organizations based in white Western Eurocentric culture. Yeah. And when you look at organizations like Alana organizations, which means organizations focused on African, Arab, Native American, Asian descent and cultures, it was only like 9%.
So how big was the gap? Are you talking about from the beginning of ASC?
No, not from the beginning of ASC. We only had data looking like in the early 90s to here. So
you don't have to give dollars, but how big was that gap? Percentage-wise? About?
I mean, it was only like 9% of, when you look at all of total funding, yes, to Alana organizations. So that there's a chart in the equity report that makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable. I think what was really...
But was that a problem?
Yes, that's a problem. Because I always think about, one of my favorite books is Begin Again by Dr. Eddie Glaude Jr., and he talks about the value gap and the lie. And the value gap and the lie is the belief that white people matter more than anyone else. And it's the belief in that lie that has set up these structures and systems that we are trying to dismantle. And those systems and structures led to people counting them as truths and breathe them as air, as he writes in his book. And that's the same thing in the cultural sector.
Mm-hmm. But is that specific to Charlotte, or would you say that's macro?
No, that's nationally. That's nationally.
It's a macro thing.
Yes, absolutely.
But why aren't other cities, local arts agencies, taking the path that you took in terms of?
Well, they are. I mean, we're not the only local arts agency that has done an equity report. There's other communities around the country that have done an equity report. I think we are probably the ones that came out just forceful, like, bam, we apologize, right. which I think is really important and aligns with Edgar Villanueva's work, who wrote Decolonizing Wealth, is apologize first. That's the first place and step of healing.
Oftentimes, there are macro events, whether it be in arts and culture, advertising, marketing, CPG, et cetera, in terms of the inequity associated with funding. Mm-hmm. You still have a group of people within a sector that wants things to stay the same.
Absolutely.
And so when you look at this report, you make this decision as a people leader. Why were you so vested in terms of speaking to that truth?
Because it's the right thing to do. We are on a journey that is telling the truth is an important step of the journey. Mm-hmm. It's important for my team. It's important for the board of ASC. Because
but what about your fears? Didn't you have some fears?
Well, yes, I did have some.
Family, income, job, security, etc. How were you able to reconcile that?
It was more so like, this is probably going to piss off a lot of people.
Yeah, because this happens because, most people know the truth.
Yes, and they don't.
They want to act on it. But there's a little sliver of fear, like, if I do this,
yes,
what is the repercussion as a result of that? How are you able to overcome that? And this is for our audience members who are maybe in that position themselves. They've got this truth, they've got the data, but it's the internal piece.
For me, it goes back to what is the right thing to do for the organization? What is in the best interest of the organization? And I know, nonprofits are businesses. I am running a business, and money is, key to that. But I realized, I said, we're probably going to piss a lot of people off, which we did, and they probably will stop giving to us, which some of them have. But it also is an opportunity to generate and to connect with new people that are with us and like the work that we're doing, and will support us in that work.
But what do you say to the people that will take it all the way up to the point of wanting to do the right thing. But oftentimes you hear the phrase or the phraseology, I'm going to meet them where they want to be met. I'm not going to push them over the edge to get backlash or the potential.
I think you just have to take the risk.
Yeah. And
It's either, I have a phrase, you either gonna piss or get off the pot. What are you going to do?
Yeah.
And it was really important for us to do the right thing and to tell the truth, no matter how uncomfortable the truth is. John Meacham has a wonderful quote: history is not a GPS, but a diagnostic guide. And that's what I view the Equity Report as. It is a diagnostic guide to let the reader know this was the issue, this is the problem, this is the work that they've been doing. And the reader can have a choice to say, I like the direction that they're going. I want to support them. Let me support them in their work. You're not going to be able to keep in life. You're not going to be able to keep every donor, every person. And that's okay. But how I lead is what is in the best interest of the organization. You can't be scared. Yes, you have some fear, but you just have to do it.
And then once you do it, how do you bring people along? Or how did you bring people along?
I brought people along by really through storytelling. Our team, really a team of Bernie Petit, does a wonderful, wonderful job of telling the story of our work in community, with community, and how our investments are helping organizations of all sizes as well as creative individuals. Because we're not a programmer. We're more of a connector, a capacity builder. We bring people along by constantly beating the drum about the importance of equity, how being equitable is mandatory for the future of arts and culture, from a participatory standpoint, but also from a funding standpoint. So that's how I bring people along, is really by telling the story and giving examples about the work of ASC.
And given where you're now at on this journey, congratulations.
Thank you.
I'm sure a lot of people were impacted positively and educated.
Yes, I mean, in doing the research, it's really interesting. There's a when you compare the Afro-American Children's Theater and Children's Theater of Charlotte. Now, yes, Children's Theater of Charlotte was one of the organization's original 8, when ASC was founded in 1958 to support.
And for people that don't know, the original 8 is?
Ooh, if I can remember them.
But it sounds like there were 8.
There were 8 organizations that are still around today, but that ranges from Charlotte Nature Museum, which is now part of Discovery Place, Opera Carolina, Charlotte Symphony, the Oratorio Singers, which are part of Charlotte Symphony, Carolina Voices.
But these are the 8 original
organizations when ASC was founded in 1958 to say we need an organization to raise money to be a clearinghouse to fund these 8 organizations.
Gotcha. And I'm sure demographically at that time.
It was majority white. And these are organizations that were founded in white Western Eurocentric culture. But when you look at Children's Theater Charlotte and Afro-American Children's Theater, and in the 13 years that Afro-American Children's Theater received unrestricted operating support from ASC, really in the 90s, it's just startling. In the end of those 13 years that the American Children's Theater received funding, Children's Theater total was like $3.2 million in that, and Afro-American Children's Theater was about $500,000.
The reason we wanted to do and feature the work that you're doing is because oftentimes, companies that have $1 billion of funding will make a similar decision from an equity and meaning funding. Although you're in arts and culture sector, it resembles and reflects the same model to $1 billion corporation, which is how they're funding. And when you think about the example that you just gave, I'm sure there are more Black and brown children being born in Charlotte every day than white.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that report that you've been able to do, you told the truth. You have achieved several milestones in terms of how do you save an organization? How do you begin to turn the organization around? Is there anything that you wish you would have done differently?
Honestly, no. I don't have anything that I would have done differently.
Because I'm sure all the conversations were that nice after the report came.
That all the conversations were what?
Were that nice.
No, well, I mean, no. It's interesting. In the past couple of months, I've been hearing people say, that report really
opened a lot of eyes.
Really, I don't know if, I don't know how I feel about the report. Well, the report isn't really to make you feel comfortable. I mean, right. The truth sometimes is uncomfortable.
But it sounds like you guys were able to bring along the people that wanted to come along through storytelling.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, it's not so much of me talking. Mm-hmm. It's really about doing the work and showing the work to others. Mm-hmm. I can talk all day long, but when someone sees a creative or an organization in their community doing the work and they understand that connection is made through by ASC and that it is enhancing their quality of life in different ways, then that is what's really important to me. They'll make that connection to say, I like what you're doing. Right. I want to connect with you. It's interesting when you think about Afro-American Children's Theater and Children's Theater of Charlotte. One person said in an article, well, the Afro-American Children's Theater went out of business because Black folks started auditioning at other theater companies. Mm-hmm. No. They went out of business because they were underfunded and undercapitalized. Right. When you talk about equity, this person said, well, we lost all the county funding back in the 90s in 96 due to Angels in America, which was presented by the now defunct Charlotte Repertory Theater. And Angels in America, had New Scene dealing with homosexuality, AIDS, etc. Mm-hmm. ASC was defunded by Mecklenburg County, but Charlotte Repertory Theater would get close to $500,000 every year. Mm-hmm. When you have Afro-American Children's Theater, if you look at the numbers, it's like 35,000, 36,000, drop down to 34,000. Just this up and down, while Children's Theater is tick, 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 just up, increasing. There are people do things to protect themselves, to protect ego, legacy, etc. But again, I have the receipts. I know what is going on, and we, tell the truth, and we have moved on. Sometimes, you can't keep beating a dead horse. You just have to move on. The report, again, was published in 21. We're heading into 23 and look at the work that we have been doing and continue to do.
Last set of questions. So when you think about the role of the people leader that you are, and the courage and the will, oftentimes the people you're impacting, they don't have as big as a voice as the majority for the people that have benefited. How are you reconciling that? Meaning, here's the underserved audience, residents. Mm-hmm. Here are the big funders that have decided to go in a different direction as a result of changing landscape, shifting cultures. You've made it very transparent in terms of where not only you, but the entire sector should be focused on. How are you getting support from the very people that you're trying to help or have helped?
Yes, I do get support. I like to say I have a lot of angels around me. Mm-hmm. There are people that are telling stories with others about ASC, my leadership, and the work that we are doing in community. I think about recently with Hannah Hassan, who is a local storyteller, poet. He attended our board meeting because I like to have mission moments where the board is hearing about our work, and did not know she was going to say this, but I really appreciate it. She talked about having me in this role in my leadership since being in this role, and that she has been funded with dignity and respect. And she has received funding from ASC before in the past. Hearing that from her and how I show up in the community to support creatives was really important. This is a Black woman. When I think about the late Barbara Ferguson, who founded the Afro-American Children's Theater, she passed away a few months ago, but she and I have had many conversations about other inequities and how other stories of how the Children's Theater, Afro-American Children's Theater, was treated in the past. But she was always informing others about ASC and the work, and always asking, how can I help you? How can I support you? I'm rooting for you. And so I'm really grateful. Those are just two examples that I'm really grateful for. There's much more work to be done. There's more connections that I need to make. Again, I'm only one person with a lean staff, so doing the best I can day by day. But it's really important for us to, in our role and strength as a connector, to connect with residents that have historically been underfunded, to build those relationships and make sure that they are connected to the assets that are here in Charlotte-Mecklenburg, meaning organizations of all sizes, as well as the creative individuals.
Bravo.
Because they have a cultural life as well. We just want to connect them so that they can experience something new or deepen their love for something.
Two more questions and then we'll wrap it up. Given a lot of the work and what you've said, and residents first, and the role of city government plays as it relates to the residents, what is the gap in terms of addressing the needs of all residents and the role that the city is playing or is not playing to bring that truth forward?
So the city of Charlotte, as it relates to arts and culture, with this new effort that they're doing a cultural plan, as they're creating a cultural plan, and they also they ended up raising their money to arts and culture from $3 million to $6 million. And then the Community Foundation raised the match from corporate dollars. So there's $36 million that will be invested over 3 years. We're in year 2 of that, of the infusion fund. But the city's focus is really around economic development, tourism. They want to attract people to come here. They're all about heads and beds. They also own facilities that are in Uptown Charlotte. So the sales pitch, which has been printed in the Business Journal, so I'm just going to repeat that, is really about restoring the health of Uptown Charlotte due to COVID.
Yeah.
It is helping the organizations in those city-owned facilities. So you think about the Beckler Museum of Modern Art, the Mint Museum, the Harvey B. Gantt Center for African American Arts and Culture.
Do all residents stay uptown?
No, all residents do not stay uptown. So helping those organizations in city-owned facilities and the organizations that perform in those facilities. So you think about Blumenthal Performing Arts, that's where the symphony plays, that's where the opera has their productions, that's where ballet. So I'm glad there's more money for the sector. I really am, because we have been advocating for increased funding. I'm not, since they're focused on tourism, again, ASC is focused on residents. You're right. All residents in this community do not live uptown. Well, it's fine if that's the direction they want to go in, that is fine. but who is going to continue to focus on and care for and provide experiences for residents in this community to support their quality of life from an education standpoint, economic standpoint, even from jobs, as well as wellness and education. So that is the role of the Arts and Science Council. We are here to support the broader cultural sector and not to focus on a specific geographic space.
So would you say in populations that are not in Uptown, East and West Side, are cultural deserts? And I'm making it as a broad statement. This culture already exists.
Right.
But the institution of arts and culture, do those regional pockets of the city have access similar to Uptown?
No, not so much, because you really don't have a lot of buildings, cultural is building on the east and the west side. On the east side, you just have really, I think about Charlotte Museum of History, or maybe the Light Factory. But no, again, when you think about what was the calling card, it was really about Uptown Charlotte, Tryon Street. So you had that
for the city.
For the city.
Not
so,
for ASC.
Not for ASC, but that's what ASC was tasked to do. So it's always been around Uptown Charlotte, North Tryon Street. So now you have Discovery Place and all that on North Tryon Street, and then recently, the past 10 years, you have Levine Center for the Arts. So the New Met, the Beckler, and the Harvey B. Gantt Center. That is one example of why culture blocks is so important, because we are on the east side and the west side and the north, as well as we're actually in the 6 suburban towns in Mecklenburg County, listening to and learning from community and residents about the things that they want to experience, that they want their children to experience, or seniors want to experience. We have great senior programming for seniors that we're investing in.
Right.
Because that is what they want. So I think it's important to not forget the residents that live here every single day.
Last question. Given the complexity of arts and culture as a sector and changing demographics as it relates to the residents, the city's position in terms of what they're looking to do as it relates to tourism and travel, what's the future of ASC?
I think the future of ASC is that we will continue to double down on our investments in creative individuals. We've made huge success, especially last fiscal year, over $1.7 million to creative individuals. And when I came to ASC, it was only like $50,000 to creative individuals.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And also able to double down on investments in grassroots emerging organizations that really reflect the changing population and the population of Charlotte-Mecklenburg today. Our ambition is really around multi-year funding, because just like in the past, those 8 organizations and others that were funded were able to grow, but they were funded in an inequitable way. It's now time to shift to, I call them organizations of the future. And so it's important for ASC to have the resources to be able to do that. Because again, it goes back to what the residents said, and not only just in 2014, but also in 2020, where they want relevant, diverse, and innovative programming for a changing population, and they want it where they live. So I think about Carolina's Latin Dance. I think about Brand New Sheriff production with Rory Sheriff. I think about Theater Gap Initiative that Corey Mitchell is doing.
But what about the original 8 or the other institutions that have benefited? You want to, and this happens a lot, you want to take the money that I have now and give it to other people.
Not at all. Not at all. We don't cut our way to equity. Okay. We do not cut our way to equity. Right. Number one, there is a revenue challenge that the sector has. So what I see the future of ASC, again, depending on the funding and what the city decides to do, we may take on operating support grants, but that needs to continue to be done with an equity lens, which we did in fiscal year 21, and also have resources to invest in creative individuals and organizations. But if the city decides to continue to take on operating support grants, again, since they've done that these past 2 fiscal years, that has allowed us to double down on investment in creative individuals and grassroots emerging organizations. And I believe that it is now past time for them to have the resources that they need, not just from a funding perspective, but from a capacity building perspective, so that they can grow as well. For ASC, the community is our classroom. Mm-hmm. And so it is really important for us to continue to listen to and learn from community, to build relationships with them and respond to the things that they want to see, and for us to be that connector. Got
it. Well, thank you for your time. I think you've been really insightful. You've gone on a journey that most people aspire to go on, specifically in their career. Not only that, I'm sure it has impacted you personally as well as you've gone on this journey. For the people that want to help, support, or give, or for the work that you're doing, how can they get in contact with you?
Well, thank you again for having me. I really appreciate the conversation. You can find us at artsandscience.org. That's artsandscience.org. Or follow us on any of our social channels at ASC Charlotte.
Well, awesome. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much.